Alright, so now on to tankas. Tankas are also a traditional Japanese form of poetry. They were actually quite popular as like a love letter format because of their simple length and just it really allows for like a melodic sound just because of the syllable pattern. And the syllable pattern for a tanka is 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. So it's basically a haiku with 2 extra lines of 7 syllables apiece added on. In this poem, Love at 80 by Nana McNeil, we see that she's broken it up into 2 stanzas. This is optional. Some tanka writers use 2 stanzas. They do the haiku format and then the couplet of 7 syllable lines. But some people also just don't do that, and it's just a 7-line poem. Alright, so to break this down, first things first, we're going to count the syllables. Now the pines we grew, so that is going to be 5 syllables. And then begin to touch each other, that is 7 syllables. Oh, that'd help if I could type properly. There we go. Alright, gently as we planned. That is another 5 syllables. Chair just here and wine just there. That's 7 syllables. And finally, you'd hear those wood doves I hear. So I'll just read through this real quickly without counting syllables so it sounds a bit more normal, natural. Now the pines we grew begin to touch each other gently as we planned. Chair just here and wine just there. You'd hear those wood doves I hear. Oh, very nice, lovely poem. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the haiku. I'm going to give myself a couple of extra lines between each of these lines so that we can take some notes. Alright. So, let's see, the first one. Now the pines we grew begin to touch each other. Okay, I'm going to treat this as one line, just because it flows together, so like it sounds better together. So, this, for me, makes me think of, older trees. So, these people, it sounds like they maybe planted trees. Actually. So they planted trees and they began to touch each other. This means that the trees are growing old. Now this is, of course, is a kind of imagery. It's telling us that these trees that were once planted, oh, who knows, maybe like 10 feet apart, are now touching each other. So they are... This is imagery. There we go. Gently as we plant. So this is saying that this was a planned thing. They didn't just willy-nilly plant these trees. They were expecting them to one day grow so big that they could touch, that their limbs would touch. Alright. So, I put so much here because I think I'm going to use this. I'm going to copy this when I do my analysis. Alright, so that's our first stanza, and our second stanza here. Chair just here and wine just there. For me, this sounds like a porch image. It's like the nice picture of a chair and a glass of wine on the porch, and probably, it's that real peaceful image that you get when you think about like an elderly couple sitting on the porch, enjoying their, and just enjoying their day. So this is imagery as well. Specifically, it conjures the image of a nice old couple sitting and enjoying wine. We're just going to call this a peaceful porch scene. and you'd hear those wood doves I hear. So, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the sound of wood doves, but they don't sound too much different than the mourning doves that we hear around here. They go kind of like, ooh, ooh, those things, yeah. So this is also contributing to the peaceful image. Alright, and now for our analysis. Let's bring it up where you can see it. Let's put that. Okay. So for our analysis, I'm going to start out just by reiterating that the format that this poem follows. So I'm going to say, following the 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. Oops, and I've still got the underline. There we go. Following the 5, 7, 5, 7, 7 format, this poem is clearly a Tanka. Alright, and now I really want to talk a lot about the imagery of this poem. So first off, I'm going to talk about the pine trees. So this poem references the image of pine trees that have grown so large and so old that their limbs can now touch. And of course, I'm going to make sure that I do my spell checking, because you don't have to be good at spelling, but you do have to be good at catching it. Alright. And let's see, I want to put a quote from this. So, I'm actually going to quote the first 2 lines. So now the pines we grew. Now the pines we grew, which... And then if you're quoting 2 lines, you add a little slash between the 2 lines. It's kind of a cool poetry trick or reference thing that just says, hey, I know that this is a poem and that there's 2 lines here. And then to cite it, we say lines 1 through 2. Alright, so now the pines we grew begin to touch each other. And we're going to say this quote, creates, oops, sorry. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take this, and do that. We're going to say that this conjures the image, so yeah. So as you can tell, analyzing a poem, it doesn't have to be linear. You can pull a bunch of pieces out of the poem that you want to quote and things you want to say, and then you can mush them all together like a puzzle. You don't have to write it beginning to the end, and no, that's not the ticket to success. The ticket to success is going and taking the different pieces and putting them together in a way that fits. So, now the pines we grew begin to touch each other. This quote conjures the image of pine trees that I'm going to say have grown, because we're talking about the past. Have grown so large and so old that their limbs can now touch. Alright. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the imagery in the next line. The imagery in this poem continues with the line, chair just here and wine just there. And that's line 4. Alright. This line shows us the peaceful scene, probably on someone's porch. And then I think I'm going to just give a brief overview about what I think the poem means. I believe that this poem is showing us the peaceful life of two individuals. Showing us the peaceful life of two individuals who have spent many years together. There we go. And that is how to analyze a Tanka poem.